3 spine-chilling true horror stories from forbidden places, unexplained terror revealed. Sarah stepped through the door, her heart heavy with exhaustion. Another grueling shift at the diner had drained her. The scent of grease lingered, mixing with the fading aroma of the evening's dinner. But tonight, a gnawing dread prickled at the edge of her sanity. Her daughter's beloved Mr. Flops was missing. A worn bunny that had seen better days, its absence struck fear deep in her gut. As the quiet of their suburb enveloped her, she felt the shadows around her home stretch and yawn, whispering that something wasn't right. She shook it off, attributing the ominous feelings to fatigue. But then came the whispers. Soft as the rustling leaves, they seemed to dance around her during the night, unsettling her from sleep. She stared at her children's sleeping faces, their innocence contrasting sharply with the creeping anxiety. Was she losing her grip, or was there something more sinister lurking just outside their window? The ambience of familial barbecues and children's laughter outside her door morphed into a haunting backdrop, shrouded with secrets she couldn't fathom. Determined to find Mr. Flops and perhaps find peace, Sarah dove into her neighborhood's history, her stomach tightening with each unsettling fact. As she flipped through old newspapers at the local library, chilling headlines of unexplained disappearances jolted her system. Each case linked to Mr. Thompson, the neighbor who brought cookies over and mowed everyone's lawns. That seemingly harmless smile sat upon the face of a specter that had always been there when families vanished. It sent shivers down her spine. How could someone who seemed to embody safety be so deeply sinister? When she shared her findings with her neighbors, she expected support, perhaps a few raised eyebrows filled with concern. Instead, they dismissed her worries as paranoia, a symptom of being overstressed from single motherhood. Discouragement clawed at her, and the isolation she felt deepened the pit of fear in her stomach. No one was willing to listen, leaving her to speak into the silence, one voice against an echoing void of denial. Just as despair began to choke her resolve, dread escalated sharply. One night, shadows danced outside her children's bedroom, an unsettling shuffle cutting through the stillness like a knife. Heart racing, Sarah crept to the window, eyes straining in the dim light. She saw him, Mr. Thompson, his gaze fixed on her house, filled with an insatiable hunger. Panic gripped her. He wasn't just a neighbor, he was a predator, lurking in plain sight. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Her mind raced. How could she protect her kids from this monster walking amongst them? She felt those wells of despair, heavy with every moment she hesitated. The police barely nodded at her frantic pleas, attributing everything to exhaustion, stress. Yet every bone in her body screamed that something darker was at play here, lurking just beyond the thin walls of her home. The folklore echoed in her thoughts, tales of saviors and predators hidden in the guise of neighborly kindness. But even now, while dread curled around her heart, she felt a glimmer of resilience. Familiarity could be a mask that hides horror. The true question was, how far would she go to pull that mask off before it was too late? As the moon hung high, casting an eerie glow across the street, Sarah took a deep breath, ready to confront the shadows that had begun to invade her life. The fight was just beginning, but the night whispered one last note of chilling reassurance. The real terror had only just begun. Sarah lay in bed, the sheets twisted around her body, her mind spiraling. The whispers had grown louder, slithering through the cracks of her consciousness. For every minute that passed, the shiver of dread gnawed at her, visceral and relentless. Outside, the wind howled like a lost soul, shrieking secrets she wasn't prepared to hear. The quiet of her home felt more like a tomb. Suddenly, a soft thud echoed from the living room. Her heart clenched in her chest. Had she left a window open? She sat up, holding her breath. A faint creak followed, then nothing, only the steady thrum of her own pulse pounding in her ears. With every passing second, courage battled fear, urging her to investigate. Reluctantly, she swung her legs over the side of the bed. Slipping on her old slippers, Sarah crept to the door, the floorboards groaning beneath her weight. She paused, listening intently. The house felt alive, vibrant with a consciousness that made her skin crawl. Clenching her fists, she pushed the door open. The living room was dim, illuminated only by the sliver of moonlight filtering through the curtain. The space was empty, yet she could feel breathless anticipation in the air, as if something lurked in the shadows. "Mr. Flops." She called softly, her voice trembling. No response. Rounding the corner, Sarah's heart dropped. A disheveled doll lay sprawled awkwardly near the coffee table. Its button eyes stared at her, glistening with the faintest hint of menace. She frowned. It wasn't hers, but it felt so familiar. With a trembling hand, she reached down to scoop it up. As she did, a burst of cold air swept through the room, chilling her bones. Something was very wrong. The next moment, the door rattled violently as though something were trying to force its way in. Panic surged. She bolted for the back door and fumbled with the lock. But it was jammed. The rattling continued, growing in intensity, drowning her in terror. "Get away!" she yelled, her voice shaking. Suddenly, the rattling stopped and silence fell like a heavy veil. Sarah's pulse raced. Was it gone? A shiver ran down her spine as she slowly turned back, clutching the doll. The air thickened with dread. "I see you," a voice whispered from the corner of the room, so low and sinister that it stole her breath away. It could only belong to one person. "Mr. Thompson," she gasped, turning on her heel to face him, but the space was empty again, the shadows swallowing his presence. Was it her mind playing tricks, or had he truly been there? A sudden clatter erupted from upstairs. It was her children's room. Adrenaline surged through her veins, transforming her dread into a desperate fervor. She could feel the weight of every moment, pressing down with the urgency of a parent knowing they were on the brink of something horrific. The clatter turned into a scream, shrill and heart-wrenching. "Mommy!" She dashed down the hall, the glow of her children's room welcoming but tainted with foreboding. The door was ajar, and Sarah hesitated. Who, or what, was in there? "Mommy, please!" The cry twisted through her, binding her feet to the floor. Without thinking, she burst through the threshold. A wave of darkness clawed at her senses. The room was empty, too empty. Where were her children? A moment later, she spotted their beloved toys, glasses knocked over, and shadows creeping from the corners. "Mommy!" The voice echoed again, but this time from beneath the bed. With a jolt of panic, she dropped to her knees and peered under the bed. But all she found was silence, an encroaching void that threatened to swallow her whole. What nightmare awaited her in that darkness? "Sarah," the whisper slid back into her ear, sweet and syrupy, yet laden with malice. The walls began to shift, closing in on her. She could feel the presence, the darkness flaring like a predator in the night. Was it too late to save her children? Hovering on the precipice of despair, Sarah understood the depth of her fight anew. And the question loomed larger than ever, who truly was the monster in her midst? She could feel time slipping away, and with it, her last chance to protect what mattered most. The shadows swallowed the corners of the room, bending and twisting in a way that made Sarah's heart race. The chilling whisper tugged at her consciousness, urging her to look deeper under the bed. The quiet was deafening, the air thick and electric with anticipation. "Mommy," the voice came again, a distorted echo that sent chills down her spine. She couldn't decide whether to scream or to cry. Desperation clouded her thoughts. She crawled further under the bed, straining her eyes against the darkness. What if the kids were there, trapped in the shadowy void? She felt the cold floor scraping her palms. With every inch she investigated, the weight of dread pressed heavier on her chest. Nothing. Just the suffocating dark. Please. She implored, her voice trembling, but looked deeper to find only dust and forgotten toys. Her breath hitched. She pushed back, the panic igniting a fire in her veins. Get out! She shouted into the abyss, her fear giving way to anger. The walls shuddered at her words, and the whispers escalated, merging into a cacophony of confusion and fear. Sarah, it was Mr. Thompson's voice again, now resounding from the wall itself. Why won't you come to play? A searing rage ignited within her, and she shot to her feet. She had a choice now: submit to the terror or stand up and fight for her children. The uncertainty of what awaited upstairs propelled her back into the hallway. She raced up the stairs, each step creaking ominously beneath her weight. Her breaths were shallow and rapid, and she forgot about every other darkness pressing on her. All that mattered was reaching her children, no matter the cost. As she reached the top of the stairs, the air grew heavy again, thickening into an oppressive silence. The children's door stood ajar, barely holding on its hinges. A faint light flickered from inside, dancing shadows creating disturbing images against the wall. Mommy? The voice trembled but sounded strained, echoing in a strange pitch. Hold on. I'm coming. Her heart hammered in her chest. Pushing the door open, what greeted her was not what she expected. The room was filled with swirling mist, coiling and weaving like living smoke. It enveloped the toys, transforming the once safe haven into a treacherous expanse of uncertainty. Mommy! The cry was more desperate now, but mixed with something else, something dark, an edge of terror that made her shudder. Sarah stepped forward, her hands trembling but resolute. A figure began to solidify in the mist, morphing into a shape familiar yet utterly wrong. It was the outline of her daughter, but the movement was jerky, unnatural. Mommy, help us. The voice was stretched and distorted, echoing around her like a chorus. No! Sarah screamed, racing forward, but as she reached for her, a hand shot out from the mist, a jagged, skeletal claw that wrapped around her wrist with a grip of iron. Time to join the fun, the voice whispered again, cold and menacing, dragging her into the swirling tendrils of darkness. She could feel the icy grip tightening around her heart, pulling her into the depths of something she could barely comprehend. The vision of her children lingered just out of reach, terrified and beckoning. Sarah, the whisper slithered around her, an echo that promised a never-ending nightmare. The weight pressed harder. She was losing herself in the darkness, merging with the very shadows she fought so hard to escape. Would she be consumed by this lurid fate? Did she have enough strength left to break free and save her children? And then, in that suffocating moment, the world tilted. The walls of her home began to crumble, as she felt herself slipping, unraveling, spiraling into the unknown. Did she have the strength to confront whatever waited in that abyss, or was this the end? The darkness wrapped around Sarah like a suffocating blanket, pulling her deeper into its cold embrace. She twisted and turned, desperate to break free from the bony fingers clinging to her wrist. The familiar cries of her children echoed in the distance, their voices mingling with the sinister whispers that clawed at her sanity. Let go of me. Her voice broke the silence, a shriek piercing through the thick air. She thrashed wildly, ripping her arm away with a sudden burst of adrenaline. The skeletal hand faltered, vanishing back into the murky mist. Panting, she stumbled back into the room, adrenaline flooding her veins. What had she just faced? The horror pulsed around her, thumping to the rhythm of her beating heart. The swirling fog began to churn ominously, dark shapes shifting within it. Mommy! The cry cut through the fog again, sharper now, more urgent. Was it her daughter's voice, or a trick played by the wretched darkness? She had to act, there was no room for doubt. She stepped further into the room, the cold mist caressing her skin, wrapping around her like sinuous tendrils. As her eyes adjusted, she spotted two shadowy figures standing in the corner. A flicker of hope surged. "Lily? Danny?" she whispered, hoping against hope. But as she approached, the mist shifted, revealing not her children but twisted, faceless forms that writhed and pulsed with dark energy. Their mouths opened wide, silently screaming hungry horrors seeking escape. Terror flooded her, she backed away instinctively, the door looming behind her like a sickening promise of salvation. Just then, the swirling mist thickened, coiling around her ankles, trying to pull her down. She screamed again, but the sound was swallowed whole by the envelopment of shadows. The figures stretched out toward her, their arms wrought with despair and desperation. "Join us," a voice beckoned, smooth and venomous, the very air vibrating with its disturbing tone. Sarah felt something dark and seductive whispering in her mind. What if she let it in? What if she surrendered? Clenching her fists, she pushed back against the encroaching fog. "No!" she shouted, her voice strong despite the fear threatening to overtake her. "I want to join you." With every ounce of willpower, she turned her back on the figures and the whispers that clawed at her mind. She charged for the door, the mist swirling wildly around her, as if enraged by her defiance. But the door slammed shut in her face before she could reach it, the solid thud echoing like a death knell. Cold laughter rippled through the air, thick with malice. She spun around, breathing raggedly, feeling the walls closing in, her heart racing in panic. Sarah, the shadows shifted, morphing into a distorted, grinning face, not her children, but Mr. Thompson, his eyes hollow and malignant. "You thought you could escape. You wanted to protect them, didn't you? But they're already ours." Seizing a nearby toy, she hurled it at his taunting specter, but it passed right through, swallowed by the sultry mist. "You're wrong," she shouted, her resolve igniting. As the shadows clawed forward, she unrolled a memory, the fierce love for her children pouring through her. "They are not yours." And in that moment of clarity, the atmosphere shifted. The mist recoiled, shimmering as if wounded. But the darkness wasn't finished. As the walls groaned, and the floor shook, a low growl rumbled from the depths. The shadows rippled, the air thrumming with anger. "You will pay the price for defiance." Sarah's world cracked apart, and with one last terrified glance at the figures, she knew it had just begun. What horrors lay ahead, waiting to be uncovered? Did she have the power to fight back, or was she just another lost soul in the darkness? The darkness shifted around Sarah like a predator stalking its prey. She could feel its breath, icy and oppressive, creeping closer despite her desperate struggle. Fractured whispers swirled around her, now louder, repeating her fears back at her. "They're already ours." Heart pounding, she scanned the room for some glimmer of escape. The corners were heavy with shadows, the air thick with the promise of doom. "I want to let you take them," she shouted, the fear in her voice barely contained. But each shout was met with mocking laughter, resonating with malevolence. Such passion! Such defiance! The shadows twisted, morphing, a cacophony of faces pressing against the mist, their features contorting into expressions of longing and hunger. She turned, frantically searching for a way out. The door, her only hope, loomed ahead, an illusion of safety now coated with darkness. With her heart racing, she lunged for it, desperation fueling her. But before she could reach the handle, the very essence of the room seemed to shift. The walls screamed, and the floor trembled beneath her feet. "No more games, Sarah." The taunting voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a chilling echo that vibrated through her bones. "This time, you will join the countless souls who have come before you." Her mind screamed in protest. "No. They're alive. I can save them." Just then, a flicker of light emerged from a crack in the wall, tiny yet insistent. She caught a glimpse of a hand, reaching, trembling, the small fingers of her daughter. "Mommy." The word sliced through the heavy air, weighty with promise and despair. "Lily?" Sarah's hope flared, she dashed towards the light as it flickered like a wavering candle. If she could just reach it, maybe she could pull them back from the brink. But the moment she stepped forward, powerful hands not from her daughter latched onto her shoulders, yanking her back hard, slamming her to the ground. Sarah gasped, the breath knocked from her lungs. "Let me go!" she cried, clawing at the unforgiving floor. The shadows congealed around her, pressing in. The faces from earlier materialized, their mouths opening wider in a silent scream. They were grotesque, eyes bulging, and dripping with malice. "You cannot outrun the truth, Sarah." Your children suddenly, a cacophony of children's laughter erupted, echoing through the darkness. It was chilling, yet familiar, her children's laughter. It twisted in the air, celebratory yet tinged with sorrow. "Mommy! Come play with us. Stop!" she yelled, despair clawing at her, threatening to drown her. She buried her head in her arms, fighting back tears, fighting against the very shadows that threatened to pull her under. Then, silence fell. An oppressive stillness wrapped around her, thick and heavy. It felt almost peaceful, but the danger was palpable, a coiled spring waiting to unleash. "Sarah," the voice crooned softly now, coaxing, sweet as poison. "You can have them back if you give in. Join us, and they'll be free." Something inside her flickered dangerously. Was this the only way? Did she have a choice? Suddenly, a sharp crack split through the silence. The darkness shrieked as the hand of light expanded, seeping into the room, cutting through the clutches of despair. And before she could react, the shadowy forms twisted back, writhing like a wounded beast. "No!" they cried. "You cannot resist us forever." The light filled her vision, pulling, tugging at her very soul. Sarah felt her heart racing, fighting a war against dread and anguish. Flashes of her children's smiles surged through her mind. And then she understood. This was the moment, her pivotal choice. But just as she steadied herself, a sharp pain shot through her side, icy fingers piercing into the warmth of her skin. The shadows weren't done yet. She gasped, her body jerking as she tried to shake the icy grip off. Panic clawed higher within her. With one desperate push, she lifted herself off the ground, a roar of defiance spiraling from her lips. "I will not lose them." But as she staggered, gaining her footing, the shadows closed in once more, a wall of darkness growing tall and menacing. She could feel them shifting, a storm brewing with malicious intent, ready to consume her whole. Then face your fate. As the room plunged back into darkness, she was left with one haunting question lurking like a ghost in her mind. Could she survive the darkness long enough to save her children? With every heartbeat, the answer felt dangerously close, yet chillingly out of reach. The darkness lunged at Sarah, swallowing her whole in a swirling haze. Her breath fast and shallow, she felt ropes of despair tighten around her chest. In that instant, the tortured faces from the shadows morphed into one grotesque visage, etched with malicious glee. They were drawn to her pain, feeding off her terror like famished beasts thrown a morsel. "Mommy!" The word sliced through the murky abyss, raw and pleading. It was Lily's voice, but distorted, layered with the mockery of the shadows. "We're waiting, come play." Laughter erupted again, but this time it mirrored a sinister melody, taunting her every emotion. Sarah staggered backward, instinctively shielding her head. What was left of her hope unraveled like threadbare fabric. The warmth of the flickering light seemed to dim, a false beacon against the overwhelming pitch of the void. It was a cruel mirage sent to lure her deeper into despair. Suddenly, a gnashing sound echoed around her. The closet door creaked open with an agonizing slowness, revealing a dark maw more frightening than anything outside. Shadows streamed from the opening, writhing like smoke, seeping gloom and terror into the room. "Open your eyes, Sarah. Come to us," they coaxed, sweet yet malevolent, wrapping her in an insidious embrace. She felt their icy fingers trailing over her skin. It was unbearable. She lunged toward the crack of light again, desperate for assurance that Lily and the others were okay, but the shadows yanked her back, a tug-of-war with her soul. "Why do you resist?" "They're already ours," they chanted in unison, their voices fusing into a hypnotic chorus. "No. You're lying!" Sarah shrieked, tears blurring her vision. "They're still alive. They need me." Her voice bounced off the walls, but only laughed back at her a cruel reminder of her fragility. She refused to give in completely, they couldn't take her will. With a sudden clarity, she recalled how they would play in the backyard, racing around, laughing without a care in the world. That peculiarity of joy ignited a small flame of fury inside her. "My children are not yours," she bellowed, choking against the shadows. "I'll fight for them, even if it kills me." As she thrust her arms out, the light returned, piercing the darkness like a lance. It surged toward her, illuminating the twisted faces that momentarily flinched away from its searing brightness. Then a hand shot out from the crack in the wall, again small, delicate, and trembling. "Help me, Mommy." Lily's voice erupted from the light, desperate but distinct. The cry wrapped around Sarah's heart, squeezing tighter. "I'm coming, Lily." With renewed strength, she reached for the light, feeling its warmth suffuse her hand. But just as she made contact, a shadow lunged from the closet, reaching for her. She felt something cold grasp her ankle, pulling her down into the nightmare. "Let go!" she screamed, yanking her foot free. But she could already feel tiny pinpricks of cold spreading up her leg. Just then, a thought struck her like a bolt of lightning. "They want to take us together," she muttered, horrified by the realization. If they could bring her down, they could take her children too. This was a ploy, a trap designed to ensnare them all. Shadows coiled tighter around her waist, dragging her back as she fought futilely against them. "You can't have us!" she screamed, summoning every ounce of strength. Somewhere within her, an ember of resistance sparked. She would not give in. But as she felt the darkness thickening, every scream of defiance swallowed, a sorrowful question flared in her mind. Would being brave truly save them, or was it already too late? The shadows roared, and all she had left was the light flickering, fighting against the tide. As the darkness screamed her name, a violent surge shot through her spine. Just then, the world around her shifted. Would the light be enough to break the hold, or would it betray her when she needed it the most? In that paralyzing moment, Sarah realized the true fight was just beginning. The pull of the darkness was relentless, as if countless hands were wrapped around her, dragging her into a suffocating blackness where fear reigned supreme. Sarah felt herself slipping, the warmth of the light fading. The glow from the crack in the wall flickered like a dying star, filling her with dread. "Stay with me," she whispered, gasping for breath, willing herself to break free from the shadow's grip. But the faces loomed closer, their mouths twisted into grinning maws, mocking her with their hollow laughter. She felt her strength waning, but desperation surged through her veins. "No!" Sarah shrieked, forcing the words through trembling lips. "I will not let you win." With a surge of adrenaline, she clawed at the shadows, feeling their icy tendrils rip away from her skin, if only momentarily. The light brightened, a beacon cutting through despair. It wrapped around her like a protective cloak. Suddenly, the wall pulsed with energy, and she saw shapes shifting within the glowing crack. Figures flitted by, almost too quick to grasp a flash of brown hair, a pink dress, and then nothing. Her heart raced. Was it Lily? "Mommy! Help!" The sound of her daughter's voice echoed eerily, louder now, fragmented, as if it were coming from every corner of the room. "Hold on, sweetheart!" Sarah screamed, the sound tearing from her throat. The shadows slithered dangerously close, hungry, ravenous like wolves closing in on their prey. She could feel their breath, cold and foul, whispering her name. Just as she thought she couldn't move another muscle, Sarah lunged toward the light with everything she had. The shadows shrieked in fury, retreating from the illumination, momentarily blinded. Her fingertips brushed the edge of the luminous crack, and warmth surged through her body, igniting her hope. "Lily!" She called again, desperation pouring from her voice. A deeper darkness bellowed in response, "You'll never find her. She's ours now." Shivers rocked Sarah's body. She was in a fight for her sanity. The twist of emotions was suffocating. Fear gnawed at her mind, tugging her back into a void she struggled to reject. "Get out!" she shouted, her voice cracking under the weight of terror. It felt like the very essence of her being was tethered to the light, and the darkness wanted to sever it. "No matter what you do, we will prevail," the voices hissed, their echo invading her thoughts, filling her with icy dread. Sarah's heart pounded as she wrestled against the shadows, pushing toward the flickering light. Just a little further. A mantra coursed through her. "I will not give up. I will not surrender." But the shadows grew stronger, clawing at her legs, wrapping around her throat. She gasped for air, her feet slipping on the cold, slick floor. The light shimmered tantalizingly ahead, mocking her just beyond reach. And then, a glimmer of hope. What if she used their words against them? "You think you can take me?" she yelled, surging with weightless courage. "You think I'm afraid?" With a strength born from love, she swung her arms wildly, breaking free of the grip that threatened to pull her under. A shadow shrieked in pain, and for the first time, she saw their faces contort in anger, not joy. "I'm coming, Lily." As Sarah stepped into the light, a blinding flash enveloped her. For a moment, she felt buoyed weightless. But the sensations were fleeting. The light flickered again and everything went still. "Mommy?" A familiar voice echoed, but it wasn't T from the glowing crack. Instead, it came from the closet, the true darkness that had held so many secrets. She hesitated. What lay behind the door? Would she be facing her daughter or the ultimate despair? Lily. But was she too late? The shadows danced as silence enveloped her. Would re-entering the dark be her salvation or the end of her search for her children? The choice was hers. The closet door seemed to pulse with a life of its own, the wood creaking eerily as if someone on the other side was shifting in anticipation. Sarah stood frozen, heart racing, each beat hammering against her ribs like a ragged drum. Was it fear coursing through her veins, or was it determination? "Mommy?" The voice was softer now, more fragile. It curled around her, laced with an innocent desperation, and pierced her chest like a dagger. The shadows lurked at the fringes of her vision, a reminder of the torment that had almost consumed her. All the while, dread clawed at her mind. "Lily, I'm here." Sarah blurted, taking a cautious step forward, the floorboards creaking under her weight, echoing in the suffocating silence. She reached for the handle, fingers trembling as she fought the urge to recoil. What if she opened it and found nothing but empty space, or worse, something waiting in the shadows? But there was no time for hesitation. The flickering light had become a thin line, wavering like a candle struggling against gusts of wind. "I have to do this," she whispered to herself, though her throat felt tight, as if the shadows were wrapping around her neck again, squeezing tighter with every passing moment. She took a deep breath, grasped the handle, and yanked it open. Blackness engulfed her like a heavy fog, thicker than before, smelling of dampness and mildew. The air was alive with whispers, a cacophony of voices that seemed to rise from the very walls, the haunting murmurs of those who had come before her, lost in their own despair. "Mommy? Please." The plea was louder now, a pitiful wail that sent shivers down her spine. It felt so near, but where was it coming from? Panic surged, battling with the need to find her daughter. "Lily. Hang on, sweetheart." She thrust her hands into the void, searching, feeling nothing but the cold embrace of the darkness. Her fingertips grazed something, a fabric, soft and smooth. She tugged, desperation clawing at her heart as she pulled the colorless fabric closer to her. And then, silence. A deathly quiet spread throughout the room, wrapping around her like a noose, squeezing tighter. "Mommy," the voice was there, yes, but it was different now, echoing from the far end of the closet. Sarah's heart raced faster, pumping the icy fear through her veins. She stepped deeper into the dark, the temperature dropping with each movement. Shadows congealed around her as if alive, encircling her, crawling along her skin, long fingers brushing against her body. "No!" she cried out, anger replacing fear. "You want to take her." She fought against the shadows, her words slicing through the thick air, powerful and defiant. Yet they answered her with laughter, a chorus of chilling voices ringing in her ears. "Lily is ours now forever." The words slithered through the void, and the shadows shifted, growing denser, pressing closer until she could hardly breathe. She felt the fabric slip from her hands. Panic seized her heart, a vice grip of impending doom. "No! Come back!" She rushed forward, trying to catch it, but the shadows closed in even more. Suddenly, the closet tilted, the wall behind her buckling as darkness spilled in like a tidal wave. It consumed her, swirling her in a tempest of despair that threatened to drown her mind. She struggled to fight back, clawing against the unseen weight pulling her down. What had happened to Lily? Was she further away, closer than she realized, or lost for good? Just when she thought she would succumb, she glimpsed a flicker of light at the far end of the closet. Hope ignited within her, frantic and bright. But before she could move toward it, a dark figure loomed before her, eyes gleaming like coal in the shadows. "Time to join us," it whispered, the voice a jagged blade of ice slicing through the warmth of her resolve. What would happen if she reached for that light? What fate awaited her, and more importantly, her daughter? Clenching her fists until her nails dug into her palms, Sarah thought of her child. She could not let fear decide her fate. But as she stepped closer to that haunting glow, drawing nearer to the darkness, would it be the end or the beginning of an even greater nightmare? The dark figure melted into the shadows, its presence a cold chill that numbed her bones. Sarah felt her breath hitch, caught somewhere between scream and silence. The flicker of light pulsed rhythmically, teasingly, drawing her toward it like a moth to a flame. She wanted to reach out, to touch it, to find her daughter. Lily. The name escaped her lips in a desperate gasp, choked and raw. She felt more than heard the whispering around her, the promises of the shadows, the longing of lost souls yearning for company. Time stretched impossibly as she approached the light, slowing as though the universe itself was aware of her heart's beating struggle. The brilliance grew, cutting through the smothering darkness. Each step felt like an eternity, shadows wrapping tighter around her limbs, pulling her back, threatening to weave her into their fabric of despair. "You belong with us," they hissed, and fear crawled up her spine as memories of her own childhood nightmares resurfaced. She had always imagined the closet as a hidden realm, a portal to something fantastical, but this was different. This was a maw, hungry and waiting. Sarah stumbled, nearly losing her footing in her haste to escape the grip of the shadows. Cracking the door behind her was no longer a choice, it was a necessity. The light shimmered brighter, and she could almost make out forms darting within, fleeting glances of faces, twisting in agony, lost yet pleading. Suddenly, a sinister pull erupted in her chest. The portal called to her in a way that felt deeply familiar, an echo of whispered promises. "Lily's here, Sarah. Save her." The voice was sweet yet poisoned, a siren-esque call. But who was it? A trick, surely, a manipulation devised to lure her in deeper. "Stay away from her." Sarah yelled into the void, an ember of defiance sparking within her. As if responding to her anger, the shadows recoiled, but only for a moment, before rushing at her with a suffocating frenzy. "No!" she shouted, thrusting her arms outward, as if warding off a swarm of insects. The light flickered again, pulse racing, revealing brighter tones that momentarily pushed the darkness back. Was this her chance? Summoning her will, she darted toward the glow, fear transforming into raw adrenaline. She could see a figure, a silhouette of a child trapped inside that blinding sphere, every detail becoming clearer. "Mommy!" The cry was unmistakable, igniting a fierce determination deep in her heart. It was Lily, her little girl, and Sarah could feel the magnetic pull intensifying. She lunged forward. But the shadows lunged back, wrapping around her ankles like cold chains. The light was so close now, but the dark grasp was stronger, pulling her away from her daughter, devouring her spirit with each passing second. "Please!" "No!" she screamed, struggling against the encroaching darkness. Panic surged anew. The shadows were relentless, they intertwined around her with a cold grip, like skeletal hands dragging her down into a pit of despair. Just as she was about to surrender, tears streaming down her face, she remembered the stories. The old tales whispered in the corners of her childhood home, the warnings of those who had been lost to the dark. They had always claimed the light could save you, but only if you dared to step into it willingly. With a wild cry, Sarah hurled herself toward the light, the shadows shrieking in protest. It was a gamble, a moment of utter faith. As her body moved forward, the instant she connected with the light, time encapsulated her. It swallowed her whole, blinding her with its brilliance. But just beyond the light, she could hear whispers, 1,000 voices, some familiar, drowning her belief in escape. "Embrace the darkness, join us." Sarah's heart thundered. Had she made a grave mistake? Was she now part of whatever waited on the other side? Her entire world tumbled into chaos, colors swirling in a dizzying dance. And as the last remnants of daylight faded around her, a dreadful thought crept into her mind: what if she wasn't the only one running toward the light? In that moment, hesitation clawed at her once more, and a chilling realization set in. The light itself seemed to be shifting, twisting ominously, merging with the deep shadows. What awaited her would forever change everything she thought she knew about fear, hope, and the bonds that bind a mother to her child. But would she find her daughter, or had the darkness already claimed them both? The light enveloped Sarah like a warm embrace, bright and soothing yet swirling with uncertainty. It pulsated rhythmically, a heartbeat in time with her own as she soared into its depths. Fear and longing intertwined, forming a fierce determination deep in her chest. Would it lead her to Lily, or would it consume her, trapping her in a maze of forever shadows? "Mommy!" Lily's voice broke through the haze, clearer now, imbued with urgency. It resonated through Sarah, igniting a fierce spark. "Help me!" She pushed forward, fear trailing behind like a deadly shadow. Each heartbeat strengthened her resolve. The shadows squirmed around the edges of the light, their twisted faces sneering as they tried to pull her back into their hold. "Embrace us! Join us!" they chanted, but all it did was ignite her anger, fierce and burning. "No!" Sarah shouted, desperation morphing into unyielding courage. As she moved closer to the heart of the glow, familiar shapes solidified amidst the blinding brilliance. Toys, scattered and disheveled, glimmered with a strange resonance, beckoning her to come nearer. Shadows continuously gnawed at her legs, but she pressed on, unfazed. "Lily, I'm coming." But the darkness roared back, spilling forth like an uncontrollable tide. "She's ours. You'll regret this, Sarah." The light flared, flickering in response to the encroaching darkness. In that instant, she glimpsed Lily, her daughter's silhouette, vibrant against the shadowy void. But the figure wavered, fading in and out like a faulty film reel. "Mommy! Hold on, sweetheart!" Sarah cried, heart racing. She reached out, fingers stretching in desperate grasp. A powerful force surged through her, a shimmering warmth enveloping her body. Just a bit further, she thought, shoving past the clutches of despair that clawed at her heart. Suddenly, it happened. Light exploded, illuminating everything for a brief, breathtaking moment. The shadows shrieked, recoiling from the surge, their blood-curdling cries ringing in her ears. Fear turned to confusion as swirling dark arms gripped her from behind, pulling, trying to rip her apart. Get away! But a flicker of pure hope took root, rising like a phoenix from the ashes. In that searing glow consumed by shadows, she felt something shift inside her, a force of powerful love for her children. Lily! She screamed, but now it felt different. Now, it tasted like power, invigorating and resolve-defying. As energy coiled within her, reality seemed to bend. Suddenly, she was not just fighting against the darkness, she was becoming a vessel of light itself. With fire burning in her core, Sarah called forth every memory of laughter, joy, and love. You will not take my children. The darkness hissed and shrank back as if wounded. Then, there they were, Lily and Danny. Small hands reached out through the gleaming cracks, their expressions filled with unfiltered hope and fear. Mommy! Their tiny voices joined the chorus, harmonizing with her own roar of determination. Energy surged through Sarah, a torrent of protective love that spun outward like fireworks against the gloom. She could feel it crackle, illuminating the shadows, tearing them apart like fragile paper. No more. The engulfing dark began to shatter, flaking away like dead leaves peeling from a tree. Sarah surged forward, a warrior carving a path through chaos. The shadows screamed, and with each pass of her arm, bursts of brilliant light erupted around them. Take my hand, she urged, reaching for her children. They stretched their hands outward, sobs mixed with laughter cascading through the oppressive silence. As her fingertips brushed against theirs, a shocking cascading blast erupted, a beautiful, blinding light bursting forth in a radiant explosion, scattering shadows like autumn leaves caught in an inferno. In an instant, a beautiful, painful transition, the darkness fled, evaporating like morning mist under a fiery sun. The clutter of shadows drifted, screeching into the distance, the echoes of lost souls whispering their defeat. Finally, the air felt alive again, pulsating with warmth and clarity. Sarah pulled her children into her arms, their faces drenched in tears and joy. You're here. You're safe. She breathed, the release of pent-up fear flooding over her like rain after a long drought. And just like that, the horror that had woven itself so deeply into their lives unraveled. The familiar, cozy outlines of their home emerged from the gloom, vibrant and bright as if the darkness had never touched them at all. I was so scared, Mommy, Lily whispered, burying her head into Sarah's shoulder, the relief washing over them like a healing balm. Me too, sweetheart. But we're together now, Sarah said, her voice full of warmth and gratitude. She could hardly believe they were safe. As they stood there, surrounded by the remnants of their former terror, hope began to bloom anew. Let us never let darkness take hold again, Danny suggested. His innocent wisdom made Sarah smile, the weight of what they battled together lessening with every word. Together, they turned away from the darkness, embracing the light that now surrounded them. This chapter closed, but a new one began, a story not of fear but of courage, love, and family. They face whatever came next, armed with the undeniable strength that their bond had forged. As a gentle night breeze flowed through the door, carrying away the last threads of shadow, Sarah held her children a little tighter. They were home, and they would never let fear dim their light again. And with that, life continued, the terrors of the past fading into distant memories, lessons learned in the tiniest embers of their hearts. Never fear the darkness, because home was where the light would always draw them back together. Now remember, if you enjoyed this incredible conclusion, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss our next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help us reach more fans. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support is what allows these stories to flourish.